As always, it's a blessing for me to be here with you to worship God and to sit up under His Word together today. If you're a guest, if you're a visitor with us and you haven't done so in the past, we would love for you to stop by our host team desk right here as you head your way out after we dismiss today. We'd love for you to fill out a connect card for us just so we can acknowledge that you're here. We can recognize you and connect with you and also see if there's any questions that you have about our church or just any way we can be helpful to you in that way. We would love to be able to do that. If you got a Bible, go ahead and go to John chapter 2. We'll begin to start it at verse 1. In this passage that we'll be looking at, the whole thing takes place at a wedding, a time that is to be a joyous celebration of the two becoming one, of families being joined together. And one of the things that we get to witness is how Jesus responds to this couple that's getting married, or maybe even everyone that is there, in a way that is so kind and so loving that I think, even as we just sang about, will help us see that there may be some things about God and about Jesus that we were wrong about, that He's actually better than we thought. Let's start in verse 1. It says, "On the third day, there was a wedding at Cana in Galilee, and the mother of Jesus was there. Jesus was also invited to the wedding with his disciples." There's a wedding, Jesus' mom's invited, Jesus invited, his disciples are invited. Now, the weddings at that time were very different than we often have weddings now. Often for us, there's a wedding, there's a ceremony that takes place. It's usually fairly short, less than 20 minutes, generally speaking. And then there's some type of a celebration, a reception that takes place after, oftentimes, not always, but a celebration that takes place after, maybe on into the evening. The way that they did weddings at this time was it was often a week-long celebration. It's like some of y'all who try to claim a whole birthday month. Y'all know who I'm talking about. It's like y'all celebrating the whole, like 1/12 of the year. Y'all just celebrating your birthday, right? They would celebrate these weddings. It wasn't just a one-day get-together for the family and friends. This was usually often a week-long time. There was a man who was often the master of the feast, who would organize everything, make sure everything's being given out at the right time, make sure everyone's having a good time. It was a big, big, big deal that would take place. And there was a lot on the line oftentimes at these weddings. If something were to not go well, just culturally speaking, oftentimes it would bring a lot of shame upon the family, bring a lot of shame upon the bride and the groom. And in their culture, that kind of shame was something that would stick with you and affect the way that people would see you ongoingly. And that's exactly what happens. Verse 3. When the wine ran out, the mother of Jesus said to him, "They have no wine." In this culture, this would have been incredibly embarrassing. There's been a lot of shame associated and put on the family for them not preparing well for this feast that so many people were invited to, and they didn't have enough for everyone to continue to enjoy themselves. This is the case in a number of cultures. I was meeting with one brother. He was a pastor, and just culturally, he was very different from me in the culture he grew up in. You never let the food run out. It was just taboo. You never let it happen. So we would always enjoy going out to eat with him because he would just get appetizers for the entire table in abundance. Like, anytime you ate with him, you had more than enough, because the culture that he came from, for the food to run out was a very shameful thing. It's something that you do not want for those that you love and those that you care about. Just culturally, that's where he was. And so for them, for verse 3, when it says, when the wine ran out, when we read it, it might not do much for us. But for that culture at that time, this is a huge problem where there's likely, or potentially at least, a lot of panic going on among those who are part of planning everything. This would have been a very embarrassing thing. It would have been a type of thing that likely would have been the primary thing you remember about this particular wedding when you talk about it afterwards. As we were talking about this and teaching teams with other pastors across our family of churches, one pastor brought up about a wedding that he was familiar of because his friend went there. And long story short, the groom had a little bit too much to drink, and so did his friends. And he ends up getting thrown into the swimming pool. They were playing a joke, whatever. He hits his head and has to go to the emergency room at his own wedding reception, right? So he has to leave. So as you might consider or might understand, when people talk about that wedding, that's what they talk about. Oh, you mean the one when dude got pushed into the pool and then he hit his head and had to go to the emergency room? That's the kind of thing that's at stake here. That the thing that would have been remembered likely about this wedding is that this shameful thing of them not being prepared and running out of wine at this wedding. So this would have been a significant problem for the family. Not a cosmic problem by any stretch, but something meaningful to them. So Jesus' mom lets Jesus know that they're all out of wine. And this is how Jesus responded. Verse 4. And Jesus said to her, "Woman, what does this have to do with me?" Now, some of the tone here is probably lost in cultural translation. Okay, so we have reason to believe that Jesus was not being disrespectful to his mother in any way. Reasons that we can believe that he was not being disrespectful. Number one, Jesus has never sinned, which means he always honored his mother, right? So we can assume, we can believe and understand that he was not sinning against his mom. Another way we can know that he was not dishonoring his mom in any way, or that it didn't land then the way that it would have landed in our time, maybe, is that the next words out of his mom's mouth were not, look here now. I know you're the son of God, but you're also the son of me. I brought you into this world, and now what? That's not what Mary said. So we can understand that he was not disrespecting his mom, okay? That's not what was taking place. It's lost in cultural translation. We can surmise Jesus wasn't being disrespectful. So what was Jesus doing? Let's look at verse 4 again. Jesus said to her, "Woman, what does this have to do with me? My hour has not yet come." One of the things that happens as the drama of this biography of Jesus' life unfolds is that as Jesus does more and more public miracles that gain a lot of attention, as that increases, the hatred towards Jesus by the political and religious leaders of his day also increases. So in other gospel accounts, you'll see Jesus telling people after he heals them, don't tell anybody. Right? He is sovereignly orchestrating when it's going to get to the point where they decide they're going to kill him. And now isn't the hour for that. Now isn't the time for that. We've got some examples of this. John chapter 7, of this theme of Jesus' hour. John chapter 7, verse 30 says, "So they were seeking to arrest him, but no one laid a hand on him because his hour had not yet come." This is how John refers to Jesus' crucifixion taking place. John chapter 8, verse 20 says, "These words he spoke in the treasury as he taught in the temple, but no one arrested him because his hour had not yet come." Again, when John refers to his hour, it's a theme throughout the book of John. He's talking about when he's taken away to be crucified. One more example, John chapter 17, verse 1. This is the night that Jesus is taken away to be crucified. And Jesus prays this extensive prayer throughout John chapter 17 to the Father. Here's how he opens up the prayer. Here's how he begins the prayer. John 17:1. When Jesus had spoken these words, he lifted up his eyes to heaven and said, "Father, the hour has come. Glorify your Son, that the Son may glorify you." He begins his prayer saying, "Father, the hour has come." So as we work our way through this book, when you see Jesus talking about the hour or any references to Jesus' hour coming, he's talking about when he is going to do what he came to do, which is to come and die for the sins of the world, that all who believe in him might be saved, and that his creation will be reconciled back to him. That's what Jesus' hour is. And so when he says to his mom, "My hour has not yet come," he's saying it's not time for this process to get started of moving towards my crucifixion quite yet. Jesus has this massive plan that is going to change the world and save the lost and restore his creation back to the way it was to be. His priorities were far bigger and far greater than just this wedding. What she's asking him to do could potentially set things in motion before he even preaches a single sermon about who he is and about the kingdom of God or anything like that. Jesus came to this world to seek and save the lost and bring salvation to mankind, to every people, every tribe, and every language on earth. He's coming to solve the problems of sin and suffering and death that have plagued the world since Adam and Eve. And Mary, his mom, is suggesting, if not telling Jesus, to do something about this seemingly infinitely smaller problem of this family running out of wine at the wedding. Theologians and preachers have speculated about why Mary will come to Jesus with this. Some have speculated that maybe it's because Mary, if you know her story, she knew a little something about experiencing shame at a wedding. Let us not forget that Mary was pregnant before she married Joseph in a time and a place where that was incredibly frowned upon and looked down on. And Mary is a woman who knows very well the looks of those who look down on you because of your shame in their culture. Maybe Mary was trying to save this family from experiencing that kind of a shameful wedding when it should have been a time of joy and celebration. It's hard to know exactly what motivated Mary, but what we do know is that she knew that Jesus was able to turn a shameful situation around and be a blessing to all who were there. After Jesus tells Mary that his hour has not yet come, I love what Mary does. She said, it says this in verse 5. His mother said to the servants, do whatever he tells you to do. I love this. This is how the sequence unfolds. They run out of wine. Mary goes to Jesus. Jesus, they're out of wine. Jesus says, what does this have to do with me? My hour has not yet come. She don't even respond to Jesus. She go to the servants and say, do what he tells you to do. Do. Okay, Jesus. If you want to play the game, you want to go back and forth. Do what he tells you to do. And let's see what Jesus does. Verse 6. Now there were 6 stone water jars there for the Jewish rites of purification, each holding 20 or 30 gallons. So these are huge water jars. Jesus said to the servants, fill the jars with water, and they filled them up to the brim. And he said to them, now draw some out and take it to the master of the feast. So they took it. Verse 9, when the master of the feast tasted the water now become wine and did not know where it came from, though the servants who had drawn the water knew, the master of the feast called the bridegroom and said to him, everyone serves the good wine first, and when people have drunk freely, then the poor wine. But you have kept the good wine until now. First thing I want you to notice about this miracle from Jesus is that to some degree, this miracle is significant because of its insignificance when compared to the other miracles that Jesus performed. There's something we can learn from the fact that the God of the universe took time to do this for this family, even though a strong argument could be made that this miracle isn't like the other public miracles that he did of healing the lame so that they can walk and provide for themselves, or restoring sight to the blind, or even raising the dead. This miracle is different from many of those other miracles. There's not an actual literal need that is there. This is a catering issue. But Jesus steps in. Again, there is a significance in the insignificance of this miracle. Before I try to explain what I mean by that, let's look at what John writes in verse 11 about this miracle. He says, this, the first of his signs, Jesus did at Cana in Galilee and manifested his glory, and his disciples believed in him. John refers to the miracles that Jesus does as signs. As I've said before, signs are only good and useful to the degree that they direct your attention to the thing that they are pointing to. Jesus does these signs to point us to something about himself. As we work through this book, every time you see the word sign, every time you see Jesus working a miracle, you need to understand, you need to begin asking the question, what is Jesus doing this to point me to? It's not just about the miracle. This miracle is to point me to something. It's to point my mind, my attention, my heart in a very particular direction. So if we're going to understand what Jesus is actually doing, we need to know what this miracle is pointing us to, what it is revealing about Jesus. The insignificance of this miracle, especially since Jesus tells his mom that my hour has not yet come, points us to the fact that even though Jesus cares deeply about his huge cosmic mission of seeing his creation reconciled back to him and made right again, that doesn't mean that he doesn't care about the smaller details of your life. He's a God that can do both. He can orchestrate and lead his people to accomplish his global mission, and he can orchestrate the details of your life and respond to the smaller requests that we have. He can care deeply about our world's enormous problem of sin and unrighteousness and death and suffering, and he can care deeply about the problems that you experience day in and day out in your family, at your job, in your relationships, at your school, wherever you are. In your heart, he can care deeply about the primary thing Jesus came to do, which is bring salvation to all, while caring deeply about your frustration this morning, today, tomorrow, throughout this week. He is able to do both, and he always does both. I want to preach a second. This might not be for everybody. I want to preach a second to the saints that can and will pray for others But don't pray for themselves like that, because deep down they feel like it's not worth going to God about their problems. Because somewhere deep down, the belief has been internalized that this ain't something worth going to God about. That deep down, we've believed that yes, these problems that other people have, yes, we want to pray for those, we want to lift them up, we want to care about those. And so we end up neglecting ourselves because deep down, we don't really think that this little problem matters to God. So then why would it matter to me? This helps us to see, no, he cares. Jesus working this miracle shows that he cares even about this family and this problem that is an aside, to some degree at least, from the global mission that he has of making disciples of all nations and seeking and saving the lost. Jesus cares about their embarrassment. Jesus cares about their experience. Jesus cares about their wedding not going the way that they wanted to. Jesus cares about the thing that might to some seem insignificant. He cares about it. This doesn't mean he's going to answer all prayer requests in the way that we want him to. The point here is that nothing is too small for you to talk to God about. You can go to him about anything and everything. You can go to him about the meeting or the coworker or the client or patient that's stressing you out just a little bit. You can go to him about the frustration that you're having with the family member, even if it doesn't seem like the biggest thing in the world, but it's just nagging and just on your mind and weighing on your heart a bit. You can go to him about the thing that you want to get better about doing, that you've been struggling with, just making necessary changes in your life. You can go to him about those things. You can go to him about the decision that you have to make today. It's not necessarily a huge decision, but one that is weighing on your mind and will affect you and others in some way. You can go to him about it all. For my young people and also adults in the room that are in school, you can go to him about that one single assignment that you're a bit stressed out about, that is lingering and hanging over your head. In this passage, Jesus himself, he brings up a reason not to respond to this need and to this request, because his hour had not yet come, but he still responds to it. And in doing so, it is a sign to us that even when we can come up with reasons in our minds why Jesus might not care or be concerned about the problems and concerns that we have, that we serve a God who does see and who does care. Jesus himself was able to bring up a reason not to, and he still did it. I know he can continue to do and will continue to hear our prayer requests that goes against any reason that we might bring up as to why we think he might not show up for us. He's seen every difficulty you've ever had. He knows the number of hairs on your head. He is not too busy to hear your prayer. He is never bothered by your prayers. It's not like he's too busy out here saving people to care about what you have going on. He cares about everything you have going on. Everything. As people, sometimes we can get tired of trying to meet everyone's needs and be there for everyone. Don't attribute those characteristics of finite and limited people to an infinite and limitless God. He is different. He's different from us. There's no wearing him out. There's no fatigue from us coming to him with our prayer requests and with our concerns and with our pains and with our frustration. He is always prepared to hear us and be with us and for us. He's not like us. He is limitless. He's infinite. There's another layer to this story about Jesus answering this prayer request. Let's pick up at verse 7. I'm going to go from 7 to verse 10 again to make sure we remember what happened. Jesus said to the servants, "Fill the jars with water," and they filled them up to the brim. And he said to them, "Now draw some out and take it to the master of the feast." So they took it. When the master of the feast tasted the water, now become wine, and did not know where it came from, though the servants who had drawn the water knew, the master of the feast called the bridegroom and said to him, "Everyone serves the good wine first, and when people have drunk freely, then the poor wine, but you have kept the good wine until now." I want to explain a couple things to make sure we understand. The master of the feast is the one who oversees the banquet. The master of the feast, their job was to manage the flow of the feast, make sure the food and the wine were served in the right order, make sure the guests were cared for, make sure the celebration remained joyful. He comes to the groom about the good wine. coming out last because the groom, here's nothing you need to know, the groom was the one responsible for making sure there was enough wine. The groom was responsible. So the master of the feast, when he tastes this good wine, it's like, hey, why didn't you give me this in the first place? Like, people have already had a lot at this point. The groom messed up. Sometimes, family, we don't go to God in prayer because we find our problems to be too insignificant. But sometimes we don't go to God in prayer because we feel like God's going to be a little bit standoffish towards us on this one because we created the problem. Like, because I'm dealing with the consequences of my own sin, then this is not something I should go to God about, because God's going to be a little bit standoffish because he's going to be crossing his arms and just leaning back and be like, you got to figure this out because you got this on your own. We feel like God's going to be like, I told you not to do that in the first place, and now you're dealing with this difficulty. So we feel like I should probably not go to God about this because he's not that merciful or that compassionate because I got myself into this mess. This story shows us a groom that got himself into this problem. Jesus turning this water into wine is a huge blessing to the groom that prevents him from suffering the consequences of his inadequacies and his shortcomings. Again, not to say that we will never have to experience different challenges because of the bad decisions that we make or because of the wrong choices that we make. The point here is that the fact that we're dealing with the consequences of our own decisions doesn't cause Jesus to stand back. It doesn't cause Jesus to be standoffish towards us. He still wants us to come to him even when we're dealing with the pains and the sufferings from our own bad decisions. He still sees, he still cares, he still wants good for you even when you're dealing with the consequences of your decisions. Go to God about everything. Everything. If it's someone else's fault, if it's your fault, whatever it is, go to him about it all because he cares about it all. All of that said, there is an even deeper meaning, meaning and symbolism to this text. Throughout the scriptures, wine is a symbol of joy. It's a symbol of celebration. It's a symbol of God's blessing. It's repeatedly tied to gladness and abundance. There's a scripture in Isaiah chapter 25 referring to after Christ returns and makes everything right and talking about the joy that God's people will experience. Here's what it says in Isaiah 25, verse 6. It says, on this mountain, the Lord of hosts will make for all peoples a feast of rich food, a feast of well-aged wine. Then he repeats himself, of rich food full of marrow, of aged wine well refined. And Jesus at this wedding feast, he doesn't just provide some wine for the guests at this feast that he's at. Each jar, I want you to think about the numbers on this. Each jar holds 20 to 30 gallons. There were 6 jars. He says all 6 jars were filled to the brim with water. That's 120 to 180, check my math, gallons of wine. That's roughly 600 to 900 bottles of wine. For the purposes of this feast, that's a lot. For the purposes of this feast, this is basically a limitless amount of wine that Jesus provides. So symbolically, this is a sign that Jesus gives to all an abundance of joy and celebration and gladness at his feast. That this is who Jesus is, and this is what Jesus does, even to the one who was there, and the problem was there because they made a mistake. This is who Jesus is and what Jesus provides. But it gets even deeper than that. Let's look at verse 6. There's more. Verse 6. Now there were 6 stone water jars there for the Jewish rites of purification, each holding 20 or 30 gallons. And those are the ones that Jesus said to the servants, fill the jars with water, and they filled them up to the brim. The laws that God had given his people prior to Jesus coming involved a lot of external purification involved in the worship of God. And that became somewhat of a large part of their culture. But this was what they knew that God had called them to do time and time again. So when Jesus points out, or when John points out to us through his writing that Jesus used the jars that were used for purification, it calls to mind how insufficient their previous practices of purification were. John could have just said he used different jars that they held water in. John wants you to know, no, these are the jars that were used for the Jewish rituals of purification. These are things that they used to clean their external selves, probably likely in some degree or in some way for worship of God, as well as other uses that they were using for. Jesus is showing, I'm about to change how you are purified. And it's not going to be through you striving to finally be good enough for me. He said, no, I'm going to purify you. Here's the thing. He said, I'm going to purify you in a way that brings never-ending joy and gladness. He takes the things that they use for external purification and uses it for a miracle that shows off how he is the one that brings eternal joy, never-ending, an infinite, lasting celebration and gladness to his people. Because as we know, we ain't got there in the book of John yet, but we will. But because as we know, Jesus goes to the cross and dies for our sins so that all who believe in him can and will be saved from our uncleanness and our unrighteousness. And instead of us having to be anxious about, am I good enough to be clean? Have I kept enough rituals to be clean? Have I done this and done that to be clean before God and be made pure before him? What he's saying is when he does what he's going to do, when his hour does come and he dies on the cross for us, our purification will result in joy eternal with our God and gladness in him. It's a sign that points to who Jesus is. That he is personal enough to care about all of the intricacies and different things that affect us day in and day out. And he is big and powerful and loving enough to deal with our biggest problem, which is sin itself, as he comes to save us from our sins. If you're a Christian, you have been transformed. 2 Corinthians says that now you have become the righteousness of God. That is who you are now. The same way he has the power to transform water into wine, he has the power to transform you from unclean to clean, from sinner to saint, from unrighteous to righteous, and from condemned to justified before our God. And it is through that purification and that salvation that we get to experience the never-ending best wine that is the joy of God from everlasting to everlasting. I said earlier that Jesus isn't standoffish towards those that mess up. The truth is he's the opposite of standoffish towards those who mess up. The reason he came to earth is for those who messed up. The story of salvation is that all Christians are like the groom at the wedding feast. That we have messed up, that we have reason to experience shame. But Jesus comes in, he doesn't stay away from us, he moves towards us, works a miracle, and thus we are able to experience joy, we're able to experience his salvation because of how good he is, and he moved towards us. He's not standoffish towards sinners. Are you serious? The whole reason he came to earth is because of sinners. It's because he wanted to come and be with those that have messed up, that are against him. This is who he is. This is a sign that is pointing us to the character of our God. Doesn't step away from those that mess up. He moved towards us. This is why we worship him. This is the only way we can know him. If Jesus stayed away from everybody who messed up, we'd never know him. We'd have never heard of him. We would never be aware of his goodness and his glory and his love for us. And I got to say this, since this story is about a wedding where Jesus is with his disciples and he saves the day and gives joy to all. This isn't the last time in the Bible where it refers to Jesus at a wedding with his disciples. The book of Isaiah and the book of Revelation describe the time after Jesus defeats sin, after Jesus defeats Satan himself, ultimately and finally. The Bible describes our experience with him in the new heavens and the new earth as a wedding. As a time where there's two kinds of people there. There's God and there's a bunch of people who have messed up in their lives that are all with him at the wedding feast, and he has given us joy eternal as we have eternal life with him. And the way the Bible describes it is a feast where there's rich food and rich wine with him. Jesus is showing us, this sign is pointing us to the fact that our God, he sees all the difficulties, all the pains, all the things that we're worried about, and he's with us through that. He sees the big problem, the fact that we have sinned against him, and he's come to save us from that. And the solution to that is that he gives joy. The master of the feast, he said, you saved the good wine until now. that the wine that Jesus gives, the joy that Jesus gives, it's not just that it lasts forever, it's that it's better than everything else you've experienced. He said, you save the good wine for last. That even though we get to experience joy with him in this life, one thing that we can know for sure is that at the end of it all, when we are with him and we are fully united with him more than anything else, we will experience the best joy that anyone has ever experienced, anyone has ever felt in their lives. We serve a God who gives the best wine. And no matter how the different situations in your life have you feeling today, no matter how they have had you feeling previously in your life, no matter how you're going to feel for the rest of your life, the best wine is always coming. The joy of the Lord is coming. It is something that we can hold on to. When you're in a situation like the groom here, where you know you've messed up and you're suffering because of it, you know at some point, we don't know when we're going to experience more joy in this life. It comes at different times, but we know there will be a day where we will experience everlasting joy forever. And when we're at that wedding feast, we're not going to be worried about shame. We're not going to be worried about somebody messing up. We're definitely not going to be worried about the groom messing up, because the groom is going to be Jesus himself, and we will be united with him forever. Jesus points us to the reality of who he is through this sign. Here's the application for today. It's real short, then I'll close. The God who loves you that much to do all of that for you, you can go to him about anything. You can go to him about whatever. You can go to him after you messed up. No issue is too small that you can't go to him about, and no sin or no mess that you've got yourself in is too big that he won't want to hear from you and that he won't want to be with him, with you. Go to him because you know he loves you and he wants joy and gladness for you. Family, y'all pray with me.